When I started going to the woods and just finding a place to kneel down and lay out what I called an altar and just to pray and wait for the sun to come up. I didn't even really know what I was doing. I grew up Catholic, but it wasn't like we were a staunchly Catholic family. I rejected it by the time I was 13 and had been on a search ever since. But when I started doing this about almost 20 years ago, um, soon after that, I started just making a fire, a simple fire that I would sit at early in the morning before sunrise to establish that connection. And during that time, I was taking care of a really close friend of mine. My wife and I had brought him into our home, and we cared for him for about 18 months till he passed away. And that event caused a deep personal shift within me. It was a pivotal point in my life. And that's when I really started going to the woods with intention in the morning before sunrise, in the evening at sunset, staying out all night. And that's when I started working with plant medicine. And something mystical and unconventional and miraculous opened up for me that has continued to open all these years. And furthermore, let me add this. I wanted my own direct experience of God, creator, source energy coming through me. I did not want any interference. I didn't want anyone to tell me how it's done. This is the way this culture does it. This is the way this tribe does it. This is the way somebody else did it. I wanted my own direct experience without interference. And so I would go out alone. And I kept doing that day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, until it's now so grounded within me. There's no shaking me loose. And that's what I think people want. That's what they come for. That's what's missing. And they don't know where to find it, especially when religion fails them.
Mm-hmm. It does. I think that's a beautiful explanation, because I think that oftentimes when people hear that, they think it's actually trying to go to some freelance thing. What I just heard you say was, no, I'm actually wanting to have like a farm to table. Like, I want to know like where my food, where my spirituality, like a sustenance is coming from, and not through someone else's filter, someone's some translation, but I want to be able to have it. I think that's probably one of the more clear, direct answers so I've actually gotten around that you're looking for a deeper connection with that, with God, with, or whatever people are calling, in terms of, I think that at the end of the day, like, it's with that source.
Yeah, exactly. And some of my dearest friends are ministers, recovered ministers, fallen Catholics, atheists, and yet we have a similar language. Like none of that presents a barrier. It actually draws people to me as it draws me to them, to explore, to question, to inquire within. That's the necessary piece, to be able to look deeply within, to question your faith, question that connection, and really seek for it within.
I heard one of my clients I was coaching had said, the adage that things don't happen to you, and she goes, often the people go, they happen for you, and she goes, I think that there's even more. There's a step beyond that. She goes, I don't think they happen to you or for you. I think they happen through you. And I think that another one of our guests that we had on there talked about the word sin, and I thought it was such an interesting, how sin gets used, and it's usually sort of like around like, well, you kind of fucked up, sort of, sort of moment.
Permanently, like there's no overcoming that.
Yeah, no overcoming it. But then he goes, oftentimes I've heard people talk about that sin is, in archery, missed the mark. And he said, if you really go back, and I can't remember how he broke it down in terms of like the etymology of it, it means lost connection.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful.
And I think that what I'm hearing you say is that you are providing people paths to like find that internal connection.
Yeah. In essence, yes. um, the what you just spoke to about things happening to us, for us, through us. I often think of myself and refer to others as we want to be a clear vessel through which spirit, that creative life force, inner guidance can come through us unimpeded, and to not interfere with, our egoic interference. The ego likes to get in the way and get all up in there, but to be a clear vessel. And um, there's been moments when I'm like, what does that even mean, to be a clear vessel? And then to sit in that, like, what does that mean? Not like I have the definition. It's the same with shaman. What does that mean, without uh, making it a label that sticks? It's a way of being. It's a way of life. It's a way of seeing the world through elemental eyes. I've gone back to the definition of shaman, but to be a clear vessel, a conduit through which life force is expressed through us. Our authentically who we are comes through, and that's the question. Who am I? That's the perennial question. Who am I? And then who is it that asks, and who is it that answers? And then listening for that, paying attention.
Yeah. When people come to you, what are the most often things that you see as they're grappling with those questions? I mean, because you think about just the question, like, who am I? For the most part, I'm 43 years old. You think at 43 years of, like, I've spent a lot of time with myself. I think in fact, I would actually probably say I've spent the most time with myself than anyone else in the world, with the exception of actually with myself. But that's such a difficult question. What are the things? What are like the disruptors, the sort of things that make it hazy or seem so distant and foggy? Like when we are having these questions around really simple concepts, but they're incredibly like the depth is like so deep. But like, who am I?
Yeah. So the kinds of questions that people come to me with are just that. I want to know who I am. I want to know why I'm here. I want clarity. I want a deeper purpose, a connection. There's often a feeling that they communicate to me that something's missing and they don't really quite know what. Or they're living a life and they seem to have it together by any outside observer, yet something's missing internally. It feels like, and they're struggling with something, reaching for something, like that. And I help them to get clarity about what that is. But when they come to be here, to be in my home, to be on the land with me and at the fire, and we're working with the medicine or without, it's the medicine's just a sacred ally, a sacrament in that respect. It's about excavating, clearing away all the stuff that's been laid on top of who you are. Societal expectations, the conditioning of your parents, your school, religion, friends, everything, the shame, the guilt, the judgment, all those kinds of things getting laid on top of who you really are, and taking the time to move some of that out, the shame, the guilt, the blame, all of that, and to catch a glimpse of who you are in that as a loving, connected, a child of God. My job is to move some of that out of the way for people and then reflect back to them who I see over there. It's a kind of a perverse thing for me to love the mess of people, because I can see through it who they really are and reflect that back to them as a loving being, as a valuable. You don't have to do another thing to be worthy. You are worthy. You are innocent. You are loved just the way you are. And to be emphatic about that, and to call them out on their shit too when they're pulling it, when their programming's running, when their racket's running, when they're they're the sort of knee-jerk response to deflect things, and to call it out and bring them close. that can be a hard conversation also for people, because we're attached. We're attached to our ego identity. And what I'm doing with folks is not helping them find a better version of their ego. It's to suspend the ego for a little while so we can see who they really are underneath all of that stuff and become more authentically expressed in practical, day-to-day, practical ways, is what I say. If it's not practical, then it's too esoteric, too, vague.
Yeah. Tom, I think that oftentimes when people start talking about plant medicine, they talk about these rituals and these clearings, which, I mean, I find it so interesting that um, a lot of things you're talking about are like, in essence, like part of the core pieces of actually like the religion, like be in silence, be in prayer, like be in reflection, ask these questions. And but I'm curious, what are some of the outcomes? I have some more questions around like what these things are, but I think someone listening to this going, okay, okay, this seems like reasonable. Like these are innocent questions. These aren't like demonic. These are kind of like, hey, who am I? And who doesn't want to excavate and get back to that 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 perfect version of you that already exists. But what are some of the things that you have seen when people come to you? They came to you like this and now they're this. Because I think sometimes it helps when people have an understanding of, hey, what is the outcome like when people are coming to this? It's not just, okay, I'm this boy who's had this trauma. Okay, great. But like before and after photos.
Yeah. Um, it's an interesting, I love the question, and it can be difficult sometimes to capture like what's changed, what's shifted, because on the face of it, it can appear that nothing's changed in their lives externally, but the changes are happening internally. But they do reflect outwardly. And some of the ways that occurs, as I'm thinking about it, is um, I'm thinking of one, and then I'm thinking of several. They become more authentically expressed, more willing to express who they are in relationship, in social settings, in their writing, what they're putting out to the world, whether they're an online entrepreneur expressing themselves one particular way, and then they start to interject a deeper truth of who they are, a deeper expression of what they're really here for, what they're really about, you know, um, and that still sounds vague. The quality of the relationships
Mm.
is a clear indicator that something shifted. More loving, more caring, deeper communication, more willing to say what's there for them to say, including, I love you, and including, thank you for loving me. Helping people to slow it way down. I was having this conversation with one of my clients in a session. We were working at the fire, and he says, I've begun to realize that I've never really let my self-love in. First it was love, just love, like the people in his world, not really receiving that. And then it was his own love. But this is a man that I love. And I said, I love you, you love me. But when I tell you I love you, how would I know that you received it and that you didn't deflect it or do something with it to diminish it?
Mm.
And he thought about it, and he said, I would say, thank you for loving me. And that became like a centerpiece of our time together, was this statement, thank you for loving me. Just imagine, even for a moment, the power of that when someone expresses either an acknowledgement or their love for you, and you slow it down and say, thank you for loving me. And they get that you got it. That's just one powerful snippet of what occurs in this work. But so often I tell them, don't blow up your life. Don't quit your job, get a divorce, and move. Take it brick by brick. Taking one out, putting one in. And generally it's along the lines of finding ways to be more authentically expressed in the world in the most mundane ways and in the most profound ways, speaking their truth, engaging in practices that develop and open that, like journaling, and being willing to have deep, connected conversations with people in your world. Those are just a handful of some of the things. In addition to, I've had clients sell everything and leave the country they were in to come to this country, or leave their spouse, or create a new relationship with someone they really care about, clean it up with their kids and their parents.
It's almost like you're helping them find these internal connections so that they can actually have asymmetric external connections. And I had one of the things every 90 days I go coach entrepreneurs out in Chicago and in LA. In this last one, I do this exercise called headwinds and tailwinds, because so much of life can feel like some days like you're in a tailwind, and it's like you're riding a bike and you look down to make sure it's like that's actually a bike, that's not an e-bike, right? You're like, do I have a chain? And because it just feels so free, and you feel like on top of the world, and then you realize you got to turn the bike around and head home, and then you realize, oh, it was actually a tailwind. And then anyways, one of the he was sharing, and he talked about that he had a plant medicine experience. And even before, and I see him every 90 days for the last 2 years. And there was just something different about him. And I'm talking at like, it felt like at a cellular level, how the skin sat on his face, how his eyes, like how they moved, how they actually didn't move, and how in terms of when we would talk, his eyes would like hold steady. And there was something different. And then he actually said he had this moment, and I realized for the first like 50 years of his life, he goes, I've been so, in his words, he's like, I've been so fucking angry. And then he goes, I had this, and then I realized, and I had this moment in there where I think he said like when I was 7 years old, and I've been holding on to this thing since I was 7 years old, and I let it go. And just the rest of the day. And the thing is, like, when you're around someone like that, you go, okay, you had that experience. And then inevitably you get to experience them, or you get to observe. That's one of the things when I'm facilitating these rooms is it's an energy game. Like you can feel the energy and flow. And it didn't once actually change. And the more, and it maybe it just happens a lot more in the entrepreneurial world. At least maybe this is my exposure, because I spent a lot of time in the entrepreneurial world, that more people are having these experiences because they're looking for that connection that has been lost. And so I love when you're saying this, because I want people to understand it's not like a get out of jail free card. This is not like you do this and then all of a sudden it's like all the shit that's been sitting in there just somehow got drained out. And your plumbing's cleared up. But it's much more subtle. And I think that actually, is at least my observation of it seems to be like that is actually the power, because it's never the big things. It's the death by 1,000 cuts type things.
Yeah, just like that. I often say to folks, this is not a one and done. It's not. It's a process. It's a path. It's a way. It's how you live your life. It's not my way. It's your way. And that's one of the things that one of the outcomes is helping people to find their way, to know their way, to know their way, to know their way, and to live by that. We have follow-up calls after they've been here. But what I'm in the process of creating right now is a community of, think of them as medicine people, a community of people that have been here to work with the medicine. They've been to the fire. They worked with me, and they want to extend and further integrate the deeper reality into their everyday life. And that's really a piece of it too, is integrating a deeper reality, not the middle world, ordinary everyday reality, the deeper reality that comes from love, from creation, connection to nature, connection to the spirit of things, and bring more of that into their lives in a rich, meaningful way. Through them, like this person you're talking about, something different. The way his skin is on his face, the way his eyes are, that's what I see with people. Something shifts in them. They're closer to the surface. They're more real, they're more available, they're more, we could talk about anything, and to be able to go in like that with them and talk about anything.
Yeah. I felt, it's funny you say that. I felt his presence. And at the end of the day, I was asking him, I said, hey, what have you noticed? He said, the biggest thing I noticed is that I am more present, I am more kind, and I am much more open to like loving the people that love me the most. And so it's interesting. I heard this like 4 weeks ago before you and I even had this conversation. Now I'm listening to you. Tom, one of the questions I have is, and if you want to respond to that, great. But I think the following question I have is there ever a point from the point of conception that we are that version that we're actually trying to excavate back to?
Maybe sometime in those years before the age of 5. And then as we get conditioned to our family, our culture, parental, influence and such, it somehow gets drummed out of us. This isn't like this is a new thing that I'm saying. It somehow gets worked out of us, and we spend the rest of our lives trying to find our way back to it. When people find their way to me and to the fire, and I'm talking about the fire like it's not just a little campfire. It's a fire circle. It's a shamanic space. It's a sacred circle on the land that people come into. So what I say is that they found their way here is no accident, that their spirit guided them here. They came well attended. I know that. How I know that is you're here. You've been guided, you've been directed, and here you are. And I'll often ask, so why are you here? Even if they've already told me and written it and spoken it prior, but when they get to the fire and we're sitting now in this ceremonial space in sacred space, and then I ask again, why are you here? And something much richer and deeper comes out, like what they've come for. It's a reclamation. They've come to reclaim, these are my words, to reclaim the sacred in their lives. And this harkens back to something we were talking about earlier, about where do we get it wrong, or where do we, at turn, is that we relinquished our authority, we relinquished our sovereignty, we relinquished our capacity to bless and to heal and to bestow a blessing or a prayer to the clergy, to the minister, to the priest, to the rabbi, like that, instead of claiming that for ourselves. And this has been part of my work for me, and also that I help others, is to reclaim that inner authority. I have a responsibility to bless myself and then bless my world. Not to leave it for someone else to do that, or ignore it or reject it. It's a reclamation. To reclaim the Latin root is reclamare, which is to call back, like calling a hawk back to the glove. It's something that belongs to you. That's yours by virtue of who you are, by your, birthright, like that.
Tom, I don't know if do you have kids?
Yeah, we have 4.
Or I'm curious because there's a lot of parents that listen to this, and when you think about the accountability of some of that being drummed, well, actually not some of it, a bunch of it being drummed out, is your parents' own frame of reference and journey and their filters and how their connections, right? And how we connect our synapses and our values, right? Values are really just a filter of those different things. And then you add in then other like playmates who have their own filters and values that they're running their life through. And then you go to the institutions, right? Like education. And I have a 17-and-a-half-year-old. I have a 4-and-a-half-year-old. Benny would have been 2, and Mia is or Anna is a little over 6 months, actually almost coming up on 7 months here. Um, what are the things that we can do to help foster, preserve, provide tailwind to the prevention of needing to reclaim?
I love your question. Yeah, it brings tears to my eyes because having kids is such a blessing. And as a young father, I remember thinking, who's going to tell my children about God and spirit and all of this, if not me? Is it going to be the church with the biggest congregation or the best after school program? Because we have that here. We're kind of in the Bible Belt of Southwest Colorado. Fortunately, it came to me sooner rather than later that I had to claim it for myself before I could share it with them. But I told the kids, even when they were single digits, listen, your mom and I, we've already screwed up. We've already messed you up. You're going to need counseling, therapy, coaching, workshops when you get older. I just want you to know that from the get-go. So I'm sorry, but that's what happened, And as they've gotten older and they saw me as they, and you know how kids, they don't listen to what you tell them. They watch what you do. They saw me going to the fire, and I invited them to the fire. Their mom would say, "You need to go to the fire with Dad," instead of you need to get a switch the size of your thumb and meet Dad out behind the shed. Come to the fire, and we'd sit and we'd talk. And I've worked with all my children with plant medicine when they came of age, and it's had a profound effect on their lives and on our relationship. And I think there will come a time for all of them, for your children and all children, that they have to reclaim for themselves their innocence, that they came well attended, their sense of spirit, their sense of whatever that is for themselves. And I would tell the kids, listen, nobody has any right to question your God or what that means for you. It's none of their fucking business. And I would say it just like that, unless you open the conversation with them to talk about it. But no one has a right to tell you, you're sinful, you're going to hell, or if you don't believe this, you lose access to the kingdom of heaven or anything like that. It's like, no, an emphatic no. This is your relationship, deeply and intimately your own, and you have to claim that for yourself. You have to cultivate it. I tell that to my adult clients. It's the same conversation. You have to reclaim that relationship and cultivate it as you would any relationship to deepen and strengthen your connection to source. No one can do that for you. No one can do that for us. That's ours to do. And if we don't do it, we suffer the consequences of not having that connection. We live in fear, doubt, guilt, shame, all of it. We see it in our world. It's rampant, right? Rampant. And using religion and using Christianity as a cudgel. It's really, really messed up like that. What I say, and I want to share this with you, is by strengthening and deepening my connection on the vertical plane, I stabilize the horizontal plane. So that connection, deeply grounded, deeply connected like that, stabilizes the horizontal plane in which we move in the everyday. But you don't have to look very far to see where there is so much instability, because people are not grounded that way. So there's all kinds of chaos and murder and mayhem going on out there, all the way up to the highest political offices in our country and in the world. It's nuts.
It is. Tom, I'm super intrigued in this, and it's almost like even if you equip your kids with all the things, it almost seems like you need to have a rite of passage. It's actually the struggle. I think of it going. I think it's like out in the West, sequoia trees. Like they need a fire that burns at like 1,000 degrees for it to actually like seed. And it almost seems that you have told your kids that like there's a certain point that you're going to need to have that 1,000 degree fire of like that reclamation for you to really reclaim it, because so much of it is that you've ridden in like our slipstream, and there's a certain point that you need to claim your journey, like you need to plant your seed, like this is the branch that like I'm going to stand from. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and in our culture, rites of passage and initiation is a formal entry into from adolescence to adulthood is largely missing, unless you're in a culture, like bar mitzvah or communion, or even getting your driver's license or becoming of drinking age or being able to vote or going to the military are forms of initiation. But there's something missing around that. I have initiated many young men at the fire in my own way, as well as I've spent many years involved in men's work, where that was an initiation for men of all ages to step into the mature masculine and live from that and address the shadow and address the bad behavior and the negativity and all the things, what we might call our failures, to become empowered and then to support one another and being connected, responsible, mature men in the world. We're certainly missing that at the highest levels, Um,
Yeah. You said something about when I'm good with the vertical and I have that connection, the horizontal takes care of itself. And I'm thinking about the wide audience I have here of people who are like, yeah, plant medicine, like, let's freaking go. And then to the other side of like, that seems sacrilegious to my faith. It seems to me that when I hear you say, when I'm good with the vertical, is that I'm like the horizontal takes care of itself, is no different than someone saying like God is in the pilot seat and I'm the co-pilot, right? And like from a religious standpoint, I mean, am I hearing am I hearing that like right? I mean, you're talking about the same thing, just in yours is wants to be a direct connection, and this one is maybe much more in a very structured
yeah,
formula.
yeah. It is. They're identical. Really, they're identical. Like if you were to ask me, "Are you a Christian?" I would say no, but I have a relationship with Jesus. And I was asked that directly. I was facilitating a memorial service for a friend who had passed away, and one side of the family was fundamentalist Christian, and the other side wasn't. And one of the men came up to me and said, "Are you a Christian?" I said, "No, but Jesus is my brother." And he said, "Okay." And it's like, that's all you need to know about me. But yes, it's the same thing. To that vertical connection, by whatever name you give it, by whatever faith you're in. Well, what I say to people about coming to the fire is all faiths are welcome here if they come in peace. So I've had people who've deepened their faith. They've deepened their faith, as well as moved away from a faith, whatever that was for them, that wasn't working, that was dogmatic, and there was retribution, and there was, all kinds of stuff that wasn't healthy, you know.
I'm really happy that you denoted that, because being as a podcast as a host, I get a lot of guests on, and I remember in college, even though I left halfway through my junior year, but there was a political science class where we had um, this article. I remember that I can't, he was a Nobel Peace Prize winner, Amani Sen. And he had written this thing that talked about when you put labels on things, it basically shuts out the room for there to be conversation. West versus East, Christian versus Muslim.
Yeah, right.
And what I love that you just did, and what I feel sometimes as I'm hosting guest there, is that there is like this identity warfare around in terms of like this is in terms of like the belief. And what I love that you just basically you created the bridge between these things that are people want to be able to like label and that and I very much appreciate that, because I think that there are things that I think, even going back, and I'm no historian, so just be clear here, but things that used to be normal rites of passage, like when you go back like hundreds of years, were like normal things that now like are not. But and it sort of like seems weird, these like um oral histories and being around like fires and having like these moments are things that I think that if you go back through history were like pretty like normal. And I want to talk a little bit about plant medicine, because I think that connection, I think that maybe people who are over on this camp being like communion, church, like God, Jesus is like my shepherd, I think go, hey, plant medicine is, one hand going, it's fucking weird, kind of scary, seems like it's kind of not in that same vein. But the more people that I talk to, the more people that I just go, I hear them talk about it. And maybe you can actually explain, are there downsides to it? Like, I think that'd be super helpful for people who are listening. But it seems to me it has only unlocked the connection, like the connection they're looking, not just the connection with themselves, but like the connection to that vertical even more so. So I love if you could maybe kind of talk about what it is not, and um and how people can maybe misalign this or maybe misrepresent actually what it is. Because you and I were talking in the green room, hey, there's a lot of industry now starting to pop up on some of this stuff, on this kind of the sacredness of this. And I think maybe help dispel and maybe give some people who are listening to this some permission to be able to go, no, this actually doesn't get in the way of my faith walk. This might actually deepen. I think would be really good.
Yeah. So I think if anybody's coming from a really rigid perspective in terms of their faith, plant medicine can look antithetical to that. Somehow or other, you're opening up something that you shouldn't open. You're opening up, you're questioning something that shouldn't be questioned, and that's just not where I come from about it at all. For sure, and I can speak to you of my own experience. Working with plant medicine has profoundly deepened my sense of connection to spirit, the spirit within me, the spirit in all things like that. And when I open a ceremonial circle and I do what I call rattling in a prayer, I'm shaking a rattle to call out a prayer. And I say as many names as I can say in a relatively short period of time, referencing that energy. Father, Mother, God, Great Spirit, uh, God, Goddess, all that is, spirit in all things, source of life, divine self within, prime creator, and then the ancestors and the master teachers and like that, all the way to you and I, the guides, angels, the beings of light who attend us in this life. So just being as inclusive as I can be. Bring me back to your question. There's like
Yeah.
a million things going through my head.
Yeah, no, I appreciate because it's the question was broad ranging, and the fact is, what is plant medicine? How do we demystify and it's almost like it's like on a federally banned list, not just federally banned, but like a spiritually banned, which you kind of talked about, like, hey, that these, and how do we make this like what is it, what isn't it, and what are the things to look for in terms of like, hey, this is not what plant medicine is, but maybe how some people are peddling it.
Yeah. So last year I went to this event in Denver. It was Psychedelic Science 2025. It was a huge event, 12,000 people, breakout rooms everywhere, huge auditoriums of presenters about focusing on the science of psychedelics and the therapy, the regulated space in terms of therapy. There was a lot of that. I could hardly find anybody that related to it the way that I do, in a ceremonial way, in a shamanic way. They were there. I just didn't connect with them. So one of the things I say about what I'm doing from this side of it is, yes, there's tremendous commercialization right now because there's a lot of money in it. Therapization, medicalization. You know how the medical paradigm just kind of moves in and said, now it's like, ask your doctor. Your Prozac or your Zoloft or your Xanax not working, maybe this will work. And then it's another menu: psilocybin, MDMA, ibogaine, ayahuasca, wachuma. Take your pick. And then I go to look in these groups where there's all these therapists working, and they have a menu of items, and you're working in a clinical space in an office. That's not what I'm doing. What I say is, this isn't that, because I'm not diagnosing, I'm not treating, I'm certainly not fixing. And where I'm coming from is, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. You can made up all kinds of stories that have you found validity, but the essential truth of who you are is, there's nothing wrong with you, and that's what we want to get to. That's what I'm working with. That's who I seeing through all the noise and the mess of being human. And I regard plant medicine, psilocybin, the mushrooms, as a sacrament. There's some similarities between the wafer and the dried mushroom. It's a sacred ally. I do not call it a drug. I don't think of it as a drug, which demonizes it, which makes it a thing that to be feared, or a thing that should be regulated, or a thing that should be dirty, bad. You're a druggie. It's no. And I've had many people who've come from they've been sober for many years, so their sobriety is a matter of deep interest to them and concern, that come to work with me, that realize it's not addictive. It's not going to send them off on a bender. They're not going to suddenly become, addicted to mushrooms by any stretch, but it opens something for them that's profound and deep. One of the women I worked with a few years back, she's, her and her husband ran a multi-million-dollar business. She was an author of several books. She told me recently, this is going back a few years, she told me recently, after our time together, she had the best 3 years of her life. And then she brought her daughter to me, her 17-and-a-half-year-old daughter. So what I'm seeing now is adults sending their adult children here, anywhere from 17 to 34, to experience the medicine, and couples who've come singly, first the wife and then the husband, or vice versa. And then when they come together, there's a much richer, deeper conversation that they're able to have with one another that they couldn't have before. And then they're sending their son or their daughter. Much as Michael Pollan outlines in his book, much of the misinformation, disinformation of plant medicine came out of governmental control, and creating a scary, there were bad things that happened, of course, like anybody who's misusing or abusing something. But there were many studies in the day, in the 60s, it stopped in the early 70s, that proved the efficacy of psychedelics, LSD, mushrooms, in treating certain things, alcoholism, PTSD, anxiety, depression, which we're now seeing again, a resurgence of all this research through Johns Hopkins and the Royal College and UCLA. I mean, it's happening everywhere now. We can't stop it. The value that it has. And so now it's becoming legalized in states, Oregon, Colorado, Oklahoma, and it's happening across the country. People are waking up. People are realizing this is not the demon that it's been made out to be. It actually has great benefit. And not only in the therapeutic space, it's for the healthy. the spiritually curious, the serious, someone who's seriously on the path. And there's been studies where plant medicine has been offered and worked with in groups of ministers and pastors who are finding a deeper connection. They don't want to talk about it so much, publicly, but it's come out in the studies, found a much, much deeper connection with God and their faith. So it has that's one of the side effects, if you want to call it a side effect. Deeper sense of connection.
What about downsides? Right? Because you hop on you throw the game on Sunday, and inevitably there's going to be a pharmaceutical. They go, and this is what this can help, and then it has about a 5-minute disclaimer that it goes, this might cause like anal leakage, and in worst case scenario, like loss of both legs and arms, and you want to consult, and yours go, wow, that is a lot of downsides for an upside. So if this was a pharmaceutical commercial, what would the man at the end or the woman at the end who goes, and then blah, 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 like, what would that say? Too much happiness, too much clarity.
Yeah, like that. But also too, if you're looking at plant medicine as something you think you might want to work with, it's really look to see, are you ready to take a deep look at your life? Are you ready to visit some places maybe you've been unwilling to visit or have blocked out? The unexpected happens. Are you willing to just prepare yourself for the unexpected and meet it, and we'll meet it together? Like that. Sometimes it can be too much for people. Their attachment to their identity is such that anything that would disrupt that or disturb it becomes, anathema. I don't
Yeah.
want that,
Yeah. How do you know if you're ready or not? Because I mean, when I think about it, it's going like, man, be prepared for the unexpected. And I'm going, well, that kind of sounds scary. Be prepared that it maybe like you're not ready for it. And I'm just going, well, shit, I don't know if I'm ready. So talk me through in terms of how would someone do an internal audit today who's like listening to this going, I might be ready if like 1, 2, and 3.
It's very much like when you feel like you've hit rock bottom or you've run out of resources and you're like, I don't know where else to turn. I've had several people come to me that have said, I've been through or burned through several therapists. This is the last stop for me. This is like it. And I have said in the past, you're right. This is the end of the line. We're going to address what's going on with you tonight. This is it right now, and we get to it. How we get to it's another conversation, but we get to it. It's not usually a straight linear approach. It's not in the traditional therapeutic model at all. So, there has to be a willingness, like a serious willingness of inquiry, of self-exploration, self-discovery, like that. And then on my end, I have a confidential assessment questionnaire where I ask all the medical questions, but also get into deeper with another questionnaire into the deeper questions of, what are you struggling with in your life? What are you afraid might come up? What is it what are you reaching for? What do you want to achieve out of this? And I also get into like their relationships with their parents or their children, childhood trauma. There's definitely several questions that reveal their trauma history, questions that speak to sexual abuse history, if that's there, questions that speak to religious or cult dynamics, because I've had all of it. I've had it show up unexpectedly, and having to compassionately and firmly and with a certain confidence isn't the right word, but being willing to go into it, to look. What happened? And then what did you make up about yourself? And who are you really out of that? To be able to separate what happened from who you really are. I know it sounds incredibly vague, even in my own ears, but that's the essence of what happens. So the downsides could be that you're going to see something you don't want to see. You're going to experience something that you didn't even know was there. And to have the willingness, it's like the courage. You said the word earlier about being a sacred warrior. It's like that. Gird your loins. We're going in together,
Yeah, but actually, one of the things you said, it seems really vague. Um, what it separates your identity from actually like what happened, I actually think is incredibly succinct, actually, in terms of that is what's happened is that we are stripping back and tearing apart narratives and being an editor to be able to go, did this happen? Yes or no? And if it did happen, does this have anything to do with your identity? Which most likely, my guess is it doesn't. And that is then the beginning of a new synapse chain that reprograms in the subconscious that like like I'm not depressed. I am fill in the blank. I am not this. I am actually, this child of God. And so that is really helpful.
So I'm having a memory of someone I worked with that he's worked with me for about 4 years, and this one night he was just angry and he didn't know why. And as I just started in with gentle questions and looking together, something happened, and I'm like, what happened? And then what did you make up about yourself out of what happened? That was the question. That's the real question. What did you make up about yourself out of what happened? For him, what happened was he was adopted and he was raised by his grandparents. What happened was his parents, what he made up is his parents didn't want him. And it took about an hour for him to be able to answer the question, what did you make up about yourself out of that? It just like it didn't compute. And he finally said that I wasn't wanted, that I wasn't good enough, that there was something wrong with me, that I was unlovable. And that came through in a lot of tears for both of us, because I go right in there with my folks too, to just be like right in the space with them of the pain, the break from belonging that occurs for us just in the course of life, and to address these things and to put them in the proper context, to put them in the proper perspective, to recognize this happened, but it's not who I am. I am much greater than this. I am much bigger than this. I have much more to offer the world than to operate out of this wound. And it's what I call making sacred the wound. So now it's a place of resource, of inspiration, of contribution to others. I've been here. This happened to me. This thing happened. And this is what I've done with it. Because now I can relate to you because of this. With deeper compassion, understanding, less judgment, greater acceptance for myself and for you,
It seems counterintuitive when I'm listening to you, because I'm listening to you, the word that keeps popping into my head is when you're hopping into that messy middle with them. It is the process of falling in love. And it seems really counterintuitive to be able to go, like, I mean, the Bible says, love thy neighbor as I love thyself, right? It's sort of like, I mean, really at the end of the day, like, it's kind of what you just are talking about. Yet we all like avoid, it's like a very glib way. When we think about love, we think, as we come up here, in the future here, we got Valentine's Day. And we think about it in a very Hollywood way, but love is, it seems to me, is a really complicated, simple, deeply complex, messy orchestration.
Yeah. Love is the driving force of what I do. And when I'm sitting across from somebody, across the fire from them, first is they have to know they're safe. And then they have to know they're loved. Even if I didn't say it, they have to know there's love here so they could go to those places. The deepest, darkest places, and also the most illuminated places of who they are. And I'll tell you, I want to speak this to you. My purpose is to give and receive love, to recognize a call for love, and to forgive anything that appears unlike love, and to respond with more love. So that's a tall order. And I don't often say that publicly, and I'm saying it now, but it's love is the driving force. So to give and receive love, to open myself to receive so I can give more, to recognize a call for love, fear, anger, upset. Sometimes they're hard to recognize as a call for love. And it might take days or weeks before, even for me, like even being aware, it dawns on me, that's a call for love. And if there's anything that appears unlike love, I'm going to forgive it as fast as I can. And by responding with more love, it's not a call for withholding myself or pulling back. It's expressing more love, extending myself in an even more loving way into whatever environment I'm in, and also to the world at large. Like what we're seeing happening in the world today is a call for love. And my job right where I'm at is to be vertically connected and extending love into the field, beaming love into the field as a deliberate act, a deliberate, prayerful act. Now, I'm not one to take to the streets with placards and protest and stuff like that. I'm the one who comes in after and blesses the space where it happened with sage and sweetgrass and a drum and a rattle, which I've done, but it doesn't make me special. It just means that I have a part. That's my part. And when we, each of us knows what our part is in this life, being authentically who we are and authentically connected to that, the deepest within us, then we can fulfill our part. And we're not doing some other part. We're fulfilling some substitute part that we thought we were supposed to do. And that's the beauty of working ceremonially with the plant medicine, coming to ground, being in a ceremonial space with the fire, clearing the obscurations of who we thought we were to get to the truth of who we are, so we know what our part is. My part is to give and receive love, to recognize a call for love, to forgive anything unlike love, and to respond with more love. That's what I'm doing. I'm doing it here. I'm doing it there. I'm doing it with my family. I do it in my community. I live in an intentional community, and people know when they see me that I'm a loving man, and that if they get within arm's reach of me, I'm going to give them a hug. Like that, like it's demonstrated, out of an intention to generate these things, to not to generate fear and control and anything like that, but to generate peace and safety and love and forgiveness, and allowing that I'm working on releasing my judgments as fast as they come up so I can be present, and I'm making I statements, but this is what I transmit to people. These are the kinds of conversations we have. This is about people sharing for themselves what's occurring for them in the conversation, just like this, about love and peace and presence and contribution and what my gifts are, and like not my gifts but their gifts.
Mm-hmm. I think that we all are looking for it, and we go down these different paths, and I think sometimes we try to find the thing that, like, so someone might hear psilocybin, they go, that sounds like a drug, that sounds scary, but they might go through a bottle or two of wine a week. It might be porn addiction, it might be drug addiction, it might be shopping addiction, it could be doom scrolling addiction, it could be, I mean, there's a plethora of things that I think people try to find their love inside. For for those who might go, okay, being in the fire circle seems like a step too far, but now I've actually been exposed to it. So now the seed's planted. Someone who goes, okay, maybe the fire circle, I'm good with and having conversation, but psilocybin, you know, still maybe a bridge too far. What are the things that people could be doing in questions and in practice that they can be almost like looking for the Starlink, like in the vertical, their vertical?
Yeah. So when I'll use this as an example, when people come here, you know, we break bread in my home. My home's a sanctuary. And then we go out on the land and we go to my fire circle and we have ceremony together. I say ceremony. I do what I call lay down the circle, open the space ceremonially with prayer and acknowledging the directions, the 4 cardinal directions above, the below, within. I offer a prayer, and then I'm like, okay, we're in. No topics are off limits. Offer, your prayers, your gratitude, your blessing, what you want to let go of, speak freely. And then we drop into a deeper conversation. That's what I call, going into a ceremonial space with people. What I'm getting to is not everybody has a fire circle in their backyard. And I've had people send me pictures of the fire circles they've created from all over the world. Just a photo. Look what I did on the beach in Australia or in Ireland or in the UK, like that. And so I say, make a circle and put a fire in it. Whether you're sitting quietly in your office or in a corner of your living room and you light a candle and it casts a circle of light, make a circle and put a fire in it. The fire of your heart, the fire of your intention, and sit quietly for a little while. Slow it way down. Now, there's many great spiritual books out there that anybody could access. I love A Course in Miracles. I reference the Bible. I have other books that I also reference and they're dog-eared. So a practice of reading something inspirational and just sitting quietly and offering a simple prayer, your own prayer. I have a prayer that I say in the morning that's by rote, but it changes, and I offer that to people and say, make it your own. Use it as a template. Journaling is a wonderful practice for getting clarity about the tone of your day and your sense of connection to yourself, your feelings, your thoughts, without going on and on necessarily about what happened yesterday as a sort of a narrative. It's really listening. I call it listening. It's that capacity, that ability to really listen for the voice of the Holy Spirit in you, the voice of your inner guidance coming through. What does it have to say? Sometimes I open my journal and it's like, what do you have for me? And then I start writing. So I have a very connected practice. I've cultivated for years, but anybody can start anywhere, right where they are. Being out in nature, especially in warm weather when you can be barefoot on the earth, or even in cold weather like in Wisconsin or here, just going out dressed up, breathing fresh air, being out in the sunshine, just moving through space, walking meditation. Meditation can take all different kinds of forms, Self-care is really big. It's not like it's negotiable or optional. Self-care is really important. It's the way you demonstrate to yourself, I love me. I care for me. I'm going to eat well. I'm going to exercise and drink plenty of water and tend to my relationships and tend to my good health, like that. Super practical. It has to be practical. When people come here to be with me and they leave, before they leave, I let them know that the things that you've gleaned here, the insights and revelations you've experienced here, we want to anchor them and ground them into the practical and every day. So you can take them out and they're a lived experience. They're not, wow, I had this amazing psychedelic experience and oh my God, it's like, it's not that, if you see some colors and see some, psychedelic shapes and whatnot like that, that's all fine, but that's not what it's about. My internal voice said, to me about that. No light show for you, because I just wouldn't see anything. It was all internal. It was all deeply felt in my body, my mind just opening like a blooming onion with insights and inspiration and that sense of connection. So plant medicine is an aid in that way. It's like a sacred tool, but it's not necessary. It's just for those that want to take it the extra step, that are seriously on the path of personal growth, spiritual evolution, personal exploration, like that. And those are the ones who find their way here,
I know you talked about people who are maybe, like I said, the audit, like how do you know like you're ready for this? You said maybe like the ones who are on the bottom. Let's talk about the ones who like are healthy, right? Who are looking to, I hate to say the word optimize because it seems super transactional when it comes to talking about your connection, that vertical connection. But for lack of better words, I'm gonna say like, how do they optimize? Like get, instead of 4 LTE, they want 5G, like connection with their. Um, what would you say is like you see on the other side of like their awareness? Is it like a 1%? Like you see increase, or do you think that obviously everyone's different? So I want to be like clear. I understand that, but is it like a 30% difference, or is it literally like you might just be like 100% different in the ways that allow you to be open?
Yeah. Well, it's across the board like that. And just to speak to that directly, I've had many, many clients who are healthy, high functioning, successful in their careers in all different pursuits, and professional, respected. Many have clientele like yourself. They have clients that they coach and consult, and they're coming for something, a deeper experience of life, of connection. They know that there's something deeper for them that they to this point have not experienced. And they've had a sense, whether through reading, study, somebody, others sharing their experience with them, that there's something available for them here, like here, and also in the realm of plant medicine, that um, it's more than just like a leg up or a cutting edge or like that. It takes them to a whole nother level of expansion in their life. And I'm thinking of one woman in particular, and her husband, whose son is now coming here in June. Um, well educated, very successful, worked in corporate. Now she's a consultant, and also came from a very religious background. And her experience, and she's been here twice now, her experience, and sent her husband after, just deepened her relationship with her clients, with her ability to be more direct and more uncompromising in what she has to offer them, being more authentically herself, especially as a woman in a man's world in many ways, in the circles that she moves in. In many ways, for many people, the word sovereignty is the word that comes to mind. Inner authority, personal sovereignty, taking full responsibility for their life, their experience, their power, and being unabashed about expressing it wherever they are in a good way for a higher good,
Hmm.
like that.
I like that. It almost feels like what I'm hearing you say is there's a deepening of authenticity, which is a magnet.
Yeah. That's one of the operative words. It's been that for me, and it's that for others that find their way here, and find their way to the medicine world. There's an authenticity that comes through that speaks to the deeper truth of who they are at their core.
Yeah. One of the things you just talked about, you said she came and then she sent her husband. How did those conversations go? Because oftentimes, we are with a partner, right? And inevitably, one partner is like, "Hey, I'm ready to do this." The other partner goes, "This seems really like seems threatening." Um, how do you advise having like people have those conversations? Because, you know, I've come across some entrepreneurs, they're like, yeah, I do it, but like my wife is like deathly afraid of doing it. And I think that there's a level like grow together, or like or else, right? And so can you talk about what you've seen, as it comes to married couples?
Yeah, one of the things, it's something that I think is common is one will tend to be more growth oriented or more willing to take a risk than the other, and that's the one that gets finally reaches a point where he or she says, "I'm going to do this thing," and the partner generally is supportive of it. Is what I see. Not that they cut across the grain of their partner's wishes and just go, but they find a way to for the partner who's not coming here to be supportive of the one who wants to, and also is curious. So it's oftentimes the curiosity is on both for both of them, and one's coming to do the exploration. Then when that one comes back and says to the other what their experience was, and even the difficulty of finding words to describe what they've been through, um, that piques the interest of the other. And this particular couple I'm thinking of, um, he knew at some point he was going to come here. And what I did was I reached out to him. I didn't wait for him to get around to it. I didn't wait for his wife to, um, not goad him, but to suggest it more than once. I just sent him an email, reached out, and he responded immediately, knowing this was his time, and he needed that extension for me to extend myself to him, to meet him where he's at, to bring him in. That's how it feels sometimes, like I'm bringing him in, or they're on a tractor beam, and I'm just like guiding them in till they get here, till they land. It's like, okay, you're here, you made it, and now let the exploration really begin. Yeah. I'll add too that when people come here, I'm not giving them. There's not another overlay of uh, psychological concepts or a theology or a psychological construct or philosophy. They come and we're clearing the deck. It's about letting down. They're filled up. They're up to here with, they're full of stuff, concepts and ideas and theories and all like that. And my job is to help them to breathe and drop in to this space and relax and create spaciousness so that something new can emerge. Whatever it is that's been pushing at them can come out, giving it the room to express itself. And part of my job is to help tease it out, with really clear and direct questions and really listening to them, for them, with them, so that I can inquire as to what is it? What is it that you're here for? You know, what is it that's stopping you? What's the story? You know, it could go so many different ways, but it all kind of wraps together, and then the next day is a day of integration where we talk about what happened and in the broad light of day and put it into context. It's like interpreting a dream or, putting together the puzzle, finding more pieces to the puzzle of who they are. So when one does that, the other one wants more, I think, for themselves, whether they come here or not, you know.
Yeah. Tom, I'd love if you shared, because obviously you got into this just like most entrepreneurial things. I think that things are, that people explore are the things that they're actually looking for themselves. And then when they realize, wow, this is amazing, then they're like, actually, I can bring this to like more people. I'm curious your journey from 13-year-old boy who realized, hey, I'm like, this is not for me, to, hey, I'm helping uh, guide people in their vertical connection journey with God. Um, like, what happened with you that was like, for lack of better words, your come to Jesus like moment?
Um, I think the first one was when I was about 15, and I got in a lot of trouble. My mom sent me to live with my dad. They were divorced, and then I came for a whole school year. I was isolated in another school closer to the city. I became a loner, um, really turned inward. And when I came back home, my relationships with my friends had changed because I realized I didn't know who I was. Who I thought I was my friends, who I hung out with, like that, which is pretty typical of a teenager, you know. But that was a beginning. That's when I started journaling, keeping a journal. I've kept a journal ever since then. For 50 years, I've kept a journal. And um, like so many of us, and I want to put this in the context of not just my own story, but the stories of your listeners, is for many of us, there are crucible moments, there are turning points, and those occurred throughout my life. Um, I I was in the military. I was in a Navy. I'm a Navy veteran. I went I went back to school. I became a chiropractor. I was a chiropractor for 30 years. Pulled up stakes and moved from Phoenix to Colorado and started over completely from scratch with a young family. Nothing, just started from scratch, moved into an intentional community. But the most pivotal moment was, and I alluded to this earlier, was a really dear friend of mine had been diagnosed with a form of dementia called Pick's disease. And my wife and I took him in. Really didn't know what we were getting into, but it didn't matter. We just loved the man. He was a dear, dear friend. And for the last 18 months of his life, we took care of him. And that experience is what really, it caused something in me that I can't hardly even explain, because he made his exit, and then here I was going, ah, who am I? You know, who am I in the matter of my own life? And that's where it began. I watched him withdraw from life and then leave. And it wasn't that he left and I stayed. It was he left and here I am going, what am I here for? What am I here for? What's my purpose? Who am I? Why am I here? And who sent me? It was just like that. I wanted to know. And I wanted to know it was such a burning desire that set me on a course that I have not deviated from. I sold my practice. I've been on this path of now working with people as a guide, a coach, a mentor on this medicine path. And this is what I do. This is my livelihood. This is my work, my dharma, like that. And there was a time when I thought one day I'd wake up and it would all be gone. Like the desire would be gone. I wouldn't feel that sense of connection. I wouldn't want to go to the fire anymore. Working with plant medicine would be like, why? What for? But it didn't go away. It got deeper. And this is the point I really want to leave people with, is when you take the time to deepen and strengthen your connection with that force within you, that power within you, by whatever name you give it, it responds and it gets stronger. It doesn't get weaker. And we are never alone. You are never alone. You are watched over, guided, and protected, and that's how I've experienced it for me. When I felt bereft and alone, my internal voice came to me and said, "You're never alone. We never leave you." They're a we, by the way. They said, "We never leave you. You're the one who goes away, and we just wait for you to come back." So no, I just don't go away. I just don't go away. And I cultivate that relationship every single day without fail. And that's what I share with your listeners. That's what I share with my clients. You must cultivate that relationship every single day. It is non-negotiable. You cannot skip. Now you can skip once in a while. I mean, like something happens, but not as a neglect. You cannot neglect that, and I'm adamant about that. And that is the centerpiece, the core, the central hub for everything else in one's life, is that connection. Life isn't a pie with, your spiritual life and your financial life and your family. It's a bundt cake. Spirit's in the center and everything else comes from that, whatever you call that relationship with your source, with God, with Creator. That's the main thing.
Wow. That's beautiful imagery. Tom, deeply grateful that you joined us today. And I know we set this up like months ago, and this was absolutely beautiful. I appreciate just your absolute guidance and understanding and helping us navigate these what seemed like differences. At the beginning of this podcast, I thought there was like differences, but actuality, I'm leaving here going, no, these are like brothers and sisters walking. I know that some other people are going to go like, hey, I want to know more. I want to find out more about you and what you're doing. Where can they go to find you?
Just go to my website, drtomgarcia.com, and sign up for my emails, for that. My phone number's on there. Send me a text. My email's on there. Send me an email. I'm totally accessible, and I'll reach back.
Yeah, and I know, and I'd love for you just again to re-talk about some of the projects you have going on. Not some of them aren't fully like done, but I think it's important for people to understand, hey, what's coming down the pipeline. Can you talk a little bit about your community, your mentoring program? I know you talked about previously about your one man stage show, and I don't know if it's too early to talk about, but you got a working title on something.
Yeah. So all these things are like coming in all at once this year, and I've got to kind of triage what's what. So the first thing that's in full creation right now is a community of, you could say, medicine people that have worked at the fire with me, that have worked with the medicine, to create an ongoing community of support and integration, to continue the unfolding of this path and this deep work. So I've got, it's a very intimate group that'll have, monthly calls and twice a year retreats here at my property. And that's in the works now. That's happening. And also out of that, there's been so many requests for mentoring in the psychedelic space as a facilitator, as a guide. There's many, many programs out there that are doing psychedelic facilitation, but they're all within more of a therapeutic space like that. And this is different. This is shamanic. It's elemental. It's, ceremonial. So I'm in the process of creating a mentoring program for facilitators. One of the latest things was a one-man stage show where I do ceremony from the stage, transmitting or channeling from the stage some of these spiritual truths, universal truths that come through at the fire, and include the audience, but do it as a fundraiser for the community, for things that are happening in our community that need support, need help. So all those monies would go to community efforts. And then the last thing, which is probably the longest running piece of work, is compiling all the parts for a book. And right now I call it Break from Reality, which kind of helps me to stay oriented to what this is about. It's about breaking from the ordinary everyday reality to integrate the deeper reality, to be in touch with that deeper current of creation that runs through everything. And lots of stories. I have lots of client stories, lots of my own experiences that are mystical and, visionary and, contacted in the woods and visitations and stuff like that. It sounds kind of weird to talk about it, but it's just so real, the messages that come through and how they've, profoundly impacted my life and the lives of the people that have been here. So
I love
sharing that,
Well, looking forward to it. Tom, thank you so much for being here. And as I like to do with all of my guests, I like them to have the last word, the last ripple, the last question, the last sort of call to action. What would you have our audience leave with?
Take the time every day to deepen and strengthen your connection, to establish that vertical alignment, to stabilize the vertical plane so that you might stabilize the horizontal plane of your everyday life. That is the source of certainty and safety and peace. Tend to that. That's my final word. Tend to that connection.
I love it. Tom, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you for listening. A big thanks to Elation Lab for the production and creative design. Remember to like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Keep listening for more Max Life.